Yo, JP Morgan just surprised everyone with their new take on the Clarity Act this morning. It seems like they've had a massive change of heart, and everyone is asking, why now? But before we show you today's update, let's do a little bit of a vibe check, and let's not forget what Jamie Dimon said about the Clarity Act just 4 weeks ago.
So are you happy with the way the Clarity Act is turning out?
No, because it allows them to effectively pay interest on deposits, stable coins or something like that, without the protection that they should have. And it doesn't do anything for AML BSA. It has almost no legal protections. So no, the banks will not accept it that way.
They won't
and the ABA, the small banks, the credit unions, it's not just the big guys. I'm not worried about stablecoin, but if it happened, I'm telling you, I would have nothing to do with it, and it would eventually blow up on its own. Okay, but that's my personal thing. But I do understand the concern of all the other banks. So,
well, the markup is coming. I mean, what are you going to do about it?
It is. We'll fight it. If we lose, we lose, and we'll live.
Yeah. Okay.
But it will be fought. This will not be. No one's going to bow down to this guy, okay, or that company. And he's the only one.
Yeah.
And he's spending hundreds of millions of dollars in Washington this thing.
He said he's representing the whole industry.
He's full of shit.
Well,
shots fired. I mean, like, think about the progress that has been made. And I also have to give a lot of credit to Senator Lummis, the Bitcoin senator, and of course, Brian Armstrong, for taking the high road and not taking the bait of Jamie Dimon. Like, I mean, Jamie Dimon is literally saying that the CEO of Coinbase is full of caca on live television. Like, I'm pretty sure that they got fined for him saying those words on TV. Like, the reporter was like kind of jawstruck. And then, of course, there was a couple interviews that followed with Senator Lummis. Senator Lummis excellently threaded the needle where she was like, listen, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He could be misleading people, but I'm going to say that he just hasn't read the bill, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But there are the protections that Jamie Dimon says that there isn't. And Brian Armstrong, again, it seems like he got some media training, again, took the high road, did not take the bait, did not take the character attack seriously. And he was just like, listen, look, the reality is that this bill does add the protections that he says it doesn't add. So I think what I want everyone to focus on, we've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, is I don't think it has anything to do with protections. I think it has to do with the fact that for the first time, these big banks that, I don't want to use the word cartel, but they're using cartel-like behavior by forcing the hand of government to get a certain business outcome. You know, they don't want competition from these new financial platforms or whatever you want to call it. And the competition that they see is that these financial platforms are offering interest on deposits. That's ultimately what it comes down to. But there's been a change of heart, and that's what today's news is all about. So one massive bank that has tens of, I don't know, Opti, I think it was tens of trillions, I think, last time I checked, under management. I'm talking about JP Morgan Chase Bank, came out with an announcement, I think it was a couple days ago, it was yesterday, and here's the headline from Bitcoin Magazine. JP Morgan backs U.S. crypto bill, but puts a warning label in front and center as Senate eyes August deadline. So let's get into some of the details. And of course, joining me in the studio today is the CEO of SAS Mining. We got Kent in the house. Kent, thank you so much for joining us here in the Miami studio.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on this side of the camera with you instead of just remotely in the Amazon. So
I know,
I'm loving it.
It's so different in real life, right? The energy, the vibes. I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
It's fun.
So let's jump back into this, ladies and gentlemen. JP Morgan threw its support behind federal digital asset legislation Monday, but the bank's message to Congress was as much as a caution as an endorsement. Get the framework right or risk recreating the financial vulnerabilities regulation was designed to prevent. And I'll push back a little bit on that. And the reason I'm pushing back a little bit on that is we always hear that word. It's for the children. It's the regulations are here to protect people. But if we all remember the 2008 financial crisis, there was regulations in place. Everything was regulated. And still, what ended up happening ultimately, let's just focus on the facts. It was Main Street that ended up bailing out Wall Street. No big banker went to jail for what happened in 2008. And I would say that caused more material harm to the American people than anything that Bitcoin or the broader crypto industry as a whole has caused. So we'll leave it at that. So I don't buy the regulation argument whatsoever. I think that's just an argument that they're using to say, hey, listen, we just don't like competition. So the article goes on to say, in a joint op-ed, global co-head of JP Morgan Payments and CEO of Digital Assets and Blockchain Solutions argued that the United States has a genuine opportunity to lead in digital finance, provided lawmakers pair regulatory clarity with durable safeguards. The piece arrived as the Senate races to advance the Clarity Act before its August recess, with negotiators still working through sticking points on stablecoin yield provisions, ethic rules for government officials with crypto ties, and liability protections for decentralized finance developers. I think as Bitcoiners, the part that we really care about, and unfortunately these large pieces of legislation, they get grouped together. What we care about in the Bitcoin community is protections on self-custody on the legislative side, and liability protections for decentralized finance developers. So that basically means open source developers. That's what we really care about on the Bitcoin side of things. It's unfortunate, though, that it gets all grouped into this massive, giant crypto bill that we're seeing. It goes on to say, regulatory clarity matters only if paired with durable safeguards. The op-ed stands out less for what it celebrates than for what it warns against. Rather than leading with the promise of tokenization and programmable money, the executives spent much of their argument flagging how crypto innovation could go wrong without proper guardrails. What are those proper guardrails? I mean, it wasn't too long ago that TD Bank was fined an ungodly amount of money for facilitating illegal drug trafficking, right? So there was guardrails in place there, and they still didn't really stop anything. And what I find ironic about that particular case, the TD Bank case, is that, again, no big bank executive went to jail. Now, compare and contrast that with our industry. What happened under the previous administration? We had some of the biggest Bitcoin/crypto entrepreneurs literally jailed. I'm talking about CZ, I'm talking about Arthur Hayes, and of course I'm talking about the Samurai Wallet developers. So again, it's rules for thee, but not for me. It seems like the banking industry has some type of different levels of justice, and by definition, that isn't equal justice. So the article goes on to say, on market structure, JP Morgan's position was blunt. The blockchain on which a product is issued does not change its economic function. Assets that look and behave like security should face disclosure, custody, and market integrity rules. Decentralized trading platforms that operate like brokers or exchanges should be held to the same standards. Tokenization, the executives argue, should improve how markets operate, not serve as a mechanism for bypassing the rules that have made U.S. capital markets the most trusted in the world. The bank reserved particular focus on stablecoins. Here's the sauce, where JP Morgan sees both commercial opportunity and a competitive threat. Stablecoins and tokenized deposits could enable faster settlement and reduce friction in cross-border payments. I would push back against that, and I would say they're already doing that. I mean, if you see the mass adoption of stablecoins, particularly USDT, in the developing world, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about the friction process. It's a lot easier for someone to just download a wallet and now they're able to receive US dollars than go through the whole process of opening a bank account, which at least here in the US takes about an hour and a half, and they ask you an ungodly amount of questions, or you could just download an app. Right. And here also in the US, we also have a type of privilege. In the US, we're able to open bank accounts. Depending on the country that you happen to be born in, you might not be able to open a bank account. You might not be able to open a bank account specifically to receive US dollars. This is why stable coins are being adopted the way they are. So again, I push back against those arguments. Features such as rewards or cashback on held balances lead many consumers to assume the product carry familiar protections when it does not. The result is hide and run risk, a concentrated vulnerability that surfaces in the worst moments. Now, what I think is happening here is I think JP Morgan is trying to play both sides. I think they're trying to appease the Bitcoin/crypto lobby. I think they see where the train is heading. Unlike Jamie Dimon, I think they have a little bit more humility. And I think they're saying, you know, this thing might end up being inevitable. This thing might end up being an inevitability let's just play both sides, because that's what the piece is basically saying. They're calling out the so-called risks, but simultaneously they're saying, oh no, but there's a ton of innovation here if we get it right. To me, it seems like a delay process, because we all know the midterms are coming up and it looks like the Republicans are going to lose the House. And if the Republicans lose the House, forget about the Clarity Act passing, at least for the next 2 years. And again, the presidential elections are essentially a coin toss. But I do want to share something else before I pass it on to Ken and just open up the broader conversation. The competition isn't just coming from the new, crypto financial firms or whatever. X Money just got announced. They're offering 6% APY on all cash deposited into X Money, up to $10 million of aggregated FDIC insurance coverage, unlimited 3% cash back on all card purchases, physical metal card, all your X creator payouts paid out through X Money, free wires, bill payments, checks, and more, free ATM withdrawals. So the competition isn't just coming from the crypto sector. It's also coming from Elon Musk's as well. There's clearly a changing of the guard. They're not going to be able to continue to fight this the way they've been fighting this, which is using the heavy hand of government to try to stifle the new competition, the new kid on the block. Eventually, they're going to have to force to pivot. Unfortunately for them, they've essentially been getting away for a very long time with being able to hold your money, not paying you for it, and actually, to spin on you on top of all of that, charging you a monthly maintenance fee if you don't have a minimum deposit, right? So clearly those days are going away, whether it's Cash App, whether it's X Money, whether it's Coinbase. Those companies are here to stay. They're obviously offering better products to their consumers. I don't think there's much the banks could do about that other than compete, which is what you're supposed to do in the free market. But I did find this as an interesting development. Last data point I want to share with you guys, it's not looking good. Clarity Act right now in Polymarket has a 39% chance of passing. It's down 26% from an all-time high on May 9th, where it is at a 73% chance of passing. And you guys know the deal. The reason I like the betting market odds is because people actually are putting their money at stake. They're putting their money where their mouth is. And right now, the market gives it a 39% chance of the Clarity Act going into law in 2026. One thing I do find funny, Kent, is how fast the Genius Act passed, which was, again, the propagation of the US dollar worldwide, compared to the Clarity Act, which would be mostly beneficial for Bitcoin businesses and Bitcoin entrepreneurs in the United States, and how much they've dragged their feet on it. And to quote Senator Cynthia Lummis herself, she said in her whole career, this has been the most difficult bill she has ever worked on to try to get across the finish line. Kent.
Wow. Lot to take in there. So Clarity Act, I as you were talking, I'm just thinking it. Okay, first of all, let's pour one out for the bankers, right? We all have a lot of love lost for them. And as I think through from a banker's perspective, okay, I've got this feeding trough, right? I've been going at this feeding trough for decades at this point. Now, how am I going to protect this feeding trough? That's the mindset that I would have if I'm Jamie Dimon. And the reality is, I don't think they can. Right? There's too much competition. Now, the competition is coming from all these various stable coins because they do make life easier, right? Like I live outside the US and I see it. The number one brand on the planet, most people don't realize this, is the US dollar. Like there's nothing that has greater pull anywhere on the planet. Like I think I could go to an Aborigine in the outback of Australia and say, hey, do you want dollars? And they would probably take them, right? If I have a Chris $100 bill, right? So that makes sense why the Genius Act would go so viral is because the banks can actually make money off of that, right? Distributing the tokens. Now, the Clarity Act, on the other hand, that threatens deposits. So if I'm a banker, I'm going to try to figure out, and seeing the lay of the land right here, I'm going to try to figure out how do I delay things, right? How do I keep things so that we can get to midterms? Things don't look so good for Trump. Things don't look so good for the Republicans here. And if there's a changing of the guard, maybe this whole thing just gets scuttled, right? So that seems to make sense. The problem is, I think they're backed into a corner, period, right? Because it's not just the stable coins in the US they have to worry about. There's what's going on over in the EU. They're working on their own stable coins there. And the reality is that there is a step improvement for everybody that uses stable coins, because yes, they can be frozen, right? Fully agreed. Like, they're not uncensorable, but they allow people to transact when they want, however much they want, and wherever they want. And that's a huge convenience upgrade for most people. I mean, I live in Peru, right? And I frequently see people wait in line 1 to 2 hours to get to a bank. Like, to download an app. Now, wait in line to get to a teller at the bank, right? So massive line going around the block. That's a very normal thing to see. Like, if I'm a local and I'm working hand to mouth, like, to be able to have stable coins, because all the banks in Peru, they offer dollars and soles is the local currency, right? So if I can start dollars on my phone, not to mention all the people that are indigenous that just don't have papers, period, right? Like, it just makes sense. So I think Balaji Srivastava, I'm saying his name wrong, but he talks about how we're ultimately going for a reality that it's basically green versus orange. And to me, that makes sense, right? I think the dollar and the stable coins are going to wind up replacing a lot of other sovereign currencies. And I think actually what we're not seeing yet, but we're going to see next, is the pushback from other nations as they start to realize, oh my gosh, my seigniorage, the ability to print my own money, that's starting to be threatened by the dollars on these networks. So yeah, I don't think it is a durable position for the banks, but I think the most logical thing for them to do here is to buy themselves time and try to curry favor so that they can get more out of the transition when it does happen. Now, the number one thing for me though is what you said, actually 2 points, right? It's Bitcoiners, we need to keep self-custody, and we need to allow developers to write code, freedom of speech. If those two things aren't there, I can't get behind Clarity.
I completely agree. I mean, I think the number one thing that we're paying attention to, specifically on the heels of the Samurai Wallet guys getting arrested, and the way they did it, the mechanism that they did it, which they set the precedent with Tornado Cash. And then once Coin Center sued and failed against the Tornado Cash case, literally a month later, the Samurai Wallet guys got arrested. So the way that they did it, the mechanism that they used was very clever. Obviously, it worked. And it seems, unfortunately, despite, the Bitcoin / broader crypto lobby getting behind the Trump administration, for some reason, Trump is not, I know Polymarket gives it like a 36% chance that they get a pardon, but it looks like the Trump administration is not willing to really get behind the samurai guys and get them out of prison. And that's unfortunate because, and this is the slippery slope, guys. Like, the reason that we're calling this to attention, because I'm sure a lot of you are like, Nico, I don't really care. Like, this is like, I just buy Bitcoin, I put it in self-custody, I run my own node. Like, I'm not mixing my coins. How does this apply to me? It does apply to you. And the reason it applies to you is because it's a slippery slope. Let me explain to you why. What happens when Elizabeth Warren says, hey, you, Bitcoin open source wallet developer, you are now facilitating payments against a sanctioned U.S. country because you're working on Bitcoin. And because Iran is now receiving payments in Bitcoin, you are enabling that because you're a developer. Like, that is the dangerous precedent. And that's where I believe it was heading. That's why it's so important to put this type of language in the bill, because it specifically protects against that, right? And that's what I want you guys to pay attention to. So I think the big takeaway here, guys, is, everything's up in flux. There's an election that's coming up. Unfortunately, I call them fiat of elections because, they are fiat elections. It's really a popularity contest to see who controls the money printer. That's really how I see it. Fiat elections still do matter, right? You still do want representatives in office in your specific country that, you got to vote for your bag. Like, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. I'm a single issue voter myself. Like, I care. I'm like, is this specific politician that's about to get in power, are they pro-Bitcoin? Or are they anti-Bitcoin? Are they pro-CBDC, anti-Bitcoin? Are they pro-Bitcoin, anti-CBDC? That's ultimately what I care about. Because if you fix the money, everything else I think goes downstream from that, right? So we have to fix the money. I think if you have a country on sound money, that's the dream I think that we're all working towards. I think a lot of the other things that you see are symptoms of broken money. So you have to address the root cause. Once you address the root cause, I think everything else takes care of itself. At least that's the thesis. Maybe I'm seeing something that's not there. Kent, what's your take?
Man, I loved hearing you say that, because for me, as we're going through the depths of the bear market here, you know, the core value that I think unites all Bitcoiners, you know, everybody comes, I think, well, maybe not everybody, but most people come for number go up, but you stay for freedom go up, right? And I think the core value that unites the Bitcoin community, once you fully get orange pilled, is separation of money and state. Right? I think that's what we are all here for. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin is not going to fix as a hard money every societal ill. It won't. But it knocks off so many problems that are downstream of it that it is, in my opinion, the best place to put your life force to fight for a better system and a better solution for our future. And by that, I mean, you know, you look at the debt-based monetary system that we're under here, Nico, right? Literally, we are on track by the end of next year to have $50 trillion in debt. Did you know that? $50 trillion.
That's crazy.
Now, who's paying that back?
It's unpayable.
Our kids, our grandkids.
I mean,
that's
the thesis, but like that's unpayable. I mean, just to give you guys a perspective, like the GDP of El Salvador is like 300 billion or something like that. You're talking about 50 trillion. Like, guys, I don't think you understand. Like that's more than the GDP of most countries on planet Earth. I think China's like 25. I have to look it up, but like that's crazy. That's absurd.
Oh, I heard that number just on a podcast driving over this morning to get here, and I blew my mind as well. I was like, oh my gosh. But the idea is that debt is a form of enslavement for the populace here, right? And this is why we need to separate money and state, is because we separate those two, and because Bitcoin is tied to the laws of physics, it physically constrains through the, you know, proof of work mechanism, but because it's tied to the laws of physics, it will physically constrain the ability of politicians to print more money to get us out of this situation, or not to allow the situation we're currently in to exist in the first place. And until we have that level of discipline, right? Like, we're not going to get the accountability we want. Like you were talking about, like the bankers, right? So many of them walked, and that created like this moral problem at the heart of our system, right? Because there's no accountability, people stop caring about the laws, right? If you're going to have laws in place and you're not going to enforce them, well, then the next guy down the street is going to see that and say, well, why am I going to listen to him too? And so then you just have social decay start. And I think we see it as we're driving around the streets, right? All this moral and social decay that's going on, and it's all coming because we don't have the discipline as a society right now to constrain our money to the laws of physics.
100%. And I think it's human nature too, right? Like, because if you look at like the historical precedent, right? Like, the Romans did the exact same thing, and that was like 2,000 years ago, right? What did they do? They debased the currency over the lifetime of, you know, first it was the Roman Republic, then it was the Roman Empire. They did the same thing. They literally, I think their currency was called the denarius. But you know, in the beginning of the Republic, it was like it had like 0.85% silver. Towards the end, it had like 0.00000000. So the point I'm trying to make is, I think it's human nature. I think it starts off with this noble cause, but I think that as the decades progress, the people in power are just like, why can't I just print a little bit, you know, get the love of the people? But there are unintended consequences to that. And I think it's our generation, Kent, that are our generation is really the first generation that are starting to feel that. We're like, wait a second, we're wealthier than ever as a country. The technology is better than ever. Right, we see deflation in technology. Right, we see technology getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper as time progresses. But for some reason, things just keep getting more expensive to live. So how is it that society as a whole is getting wealthier, but as individuals, we have less opportunity than our parents? Something is fundamentally broken. And what is broken is every time they print money, it's a wealth redistribution mechanism from the lower middle classes that don't have the means to save in assets back to the government. And the most insidious part, which is why the wealthy don't really care about this is why it's not really a hot button issue for them, is because they have their wealth in assets. Every time they print money, the value of those assets on paper actually go up. So they're getting wealthier on paper. It doesn't mean that their actual assets their purchasing power is increasing, but they're looking at the paper value of that and they're like, oh my God, my stock portfolio is up 10% this year, not taking into account that there was 7% inflation, right? But to them, they're like, oh, I'm getting wealthier. This is fantastic, right? But most people, I would say the vast majority of America, don't have the means to save in assets. They're living paycheck to paycheck. I would say not only in America, most of the world is living paycheck to paycheck.
Absolutely agreed. I think we've got this K-shaped economy going on that you're describing right now. And you look at that K-shaped economy, and there's a certain point at which the gap between those two legs of the asset holders going up and the people that are struggling to make ends meet gets so wide that it snaps, and we have like actual social chaos, problems, violence. I don't want that, right? Let me be very clear about that. And at the same time, you look at the asset holders and they're disincentivized for speaking up about it. In fact, that might be one of the main reasons why it's been so hard to orange pill the masses, is because they're holding other assets and they're seeing them go up, and they say like, why would I care about the money, right? Like, I'm winning, right? And so the misalignment of incentives with fiat is distorting like our reality, and what really galls me is our children and grandchildren's reality. It's the inability for us to fix this now is costing future generations, and that's not a choice that we're even giving them, right? Like, that's just a choice we're making on their behalf, and we're putting that yoke on their shoulders. And like, as a parent, like, man, I can't get behind it.
This is at the end of the day, you hit the nail on the head earlier, Kent, when you said, this is bigger than ourselves. I think we can all admit and have the humility to admit that you came to Bitcoin because of number go up, but you stay in Bitcoin because of the revolution. You stay in Bitcoin because of the implications of what Bitcoin would do if it was adopted on a mass scale. It really fix a lot of the pains that society as a whole goes through. So anyways, guys, it's going to be an incredible show. We have tons to cover today. And first, I want to talk about interesting, a lot of people are talking about the Supreme Court cases and all of that. We're not going to pay attention to this. It's not that type of show. If you guys are interested in that, tune into like Tim Pool or something. But there was something that Justice Thomas said in one of his opinions regarding Trump's ability to fire a Fed governor, which is really interesting. So the Supreme Court ruled that Trump was able to fire certain types of bureaucrats, but they also simultaneously ruled that he wasn't able to fire a Fed governor because they're claiming that the Fed is independent. Justice Thomas goes in there and says, how much independence? And then he goes down the history of it. He brings up President Woodrow Wilson. I found fascinating. Clearly, he knows his history on this. I think Justice Thomas might be on the end of Fed camp, I might say. Maybe he's private about it. And then also as well, let's talk about the cycle, where we are currently in the cycle. We're seeing this massive amount of ETF capitulation. 90% of them are underwater. Where are we in the cycle? I think that's a question that everybody wants to know. Like, where the answer that everybody wants to know. Where are we in the cycle? Of course, we have the CEO of a Bitcoin mining as a service company in the house today. We're going to be talking about this. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about SaaS mining, Bitcoin mining as a service as well. So it's going to be a hell of a show, guys. Make sure to smash that like button. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back just after this quick break.
Here's the part that nobody says out loud. Buying Bitcoin on an exchange and leaving it there isn't buying Bitcoin. It's buying an IOU. And the last decade has been a masterclass in what happens when those exchanges don't deliver on their promises.
Bitcoin Well is a self-custody Bitcoin platform. That means that when you buy Bitcoin, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You actually own it from the very first transaction. They're available both in the United States and Canada. Pricing is transparent. straightforward, and no nonsense. And if you're buying a larger amount of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Well Infinite gives you concierge-level support through a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, premium help for when it actually matters.
You can also stack a little extra through the referral and wishing well rewards. A nice bonus on top of the owning your own Bitcoin thing. So go to bitcoinwell.com/simply and sign up for the Bitcoin Well portal today and buy Bitcoin you actually own. Paper burns, paper floods, paper fades. If your seed phrase is written on paper, it's not really backed up. It's waiting to disappear. Stampseed's DIY kit lets you hammer your seed words directly into commercial grade titanium. Fireproof, crush-proof, waterproof, and permanent. Once your words are in the metal, they aren't going anywhere. Use code SIMPLY at stampseed.com for 15% off anything in the store. That's stampseed.com, code SIMPLY.
All right, everybody, we are back. You tuned in to Simply Bitcoin Live, the most watched daily Bitcoin-only live show on planet Earth. It feels good to say that for now. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $58,380. Block height, 956,092. Market cap, 1.17 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 3.89%. Decline from all-time high. If you're buying Bitcoin right now, you're getting it at a 53.7%. 53.7% discount. That's massive. All right. So I want to get into today's numbers story. I find it quite interesting. So this is a New York Times headline, supposedly the paper of record. It's been around a long time. And here's the headline, ladies and gentlemen, for the audio listeners. Justices expand presidential power over regulators, but not the Fed. So who the hell is the Fed accountable to? Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. The people that issue the money, they're not even accountable to the executive. They're not even accountable to the CEO of the country, which is the president, that we the people elect. Then who the hell are they accountable to? This is the crazy part. That's utterly insane. But then they're saying, oh, but he does have authority to fire certain types of bureaucrats and regulators. He has authority to do that. You can't touch the Fed. No. You can't touch them. That's crazy. That's absurd. Now, I love this opinion by Justice Thomas, and you guys have all seen the memes of Justice Thomas with the red eyes, right? And the conservative circles on X, right? Whenever there's a ruling that goes their way, they're like, oh, it's Justice Thomas. He's a badass. But it's really interesting. So Justice Thomas was on the dissenting side, right? And it was 5-4, I believe. And Justice Thomas was on the dissenting side, and he wrote an opinion. He's basically like, look, like, it's absolutely absurd that, to make the claim that the Fed is somehow independent, right? And he goes into the history of it. Clearly, he knows the history of it. Here's Benjamin Weingarten, and he says, Justice Thomas tells the truth about central banking in the U.S. It really isn't comparable with our Republican system of government. And then he adds his opinion, and he says it's a progressive German import. And then here is, and again, a lot of this is in legalese, so bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. Newly elected President Woodrow Wilson agreed with much of the Aldrich plan, but insisted upon an executive agency that would exercise government control over the banking economy. Woodrow Wilson and the Progressive Era, 1910 to 1917, see also Warburg, 81-91, Wilson in this respect was also departing from tradition. He had long believed that bureaucrats might more effectively govern the country than the American people can. Wilson's ideal system of government was not the tripartite and limited one enshrined in our Constitution, but the German Empire's system of unified administrative power, which he echoing Warburg, saw as nearly perfect. Woodrow Wilson, the study of administration, Wilson disliked the American system of government because it ultimately depended on the will of the people, whom Wilson believed were, quote unquote, selfish. And it goes on to say, timid and stubborn and foolish. That's a U.S. president, ladies and gentlemen, basically saying, listen, we know better. That's what he's saying. We know better. We need more control over the economy because we know better. And actually the control, and I guess there's a Freudian slip here, because he's basically admitting that the control is coming from the Federal Reserve, right? Indirectly, right? So the American people are too selfish. too timid, and too stubborn. Therefore, we need a central bank to manage them. Oh, and foolish. I forgot that one as well. America, Wilson said, did too much by vote. This is what I was saying. This is crazy. So basically, Justice Thomas, not Nico of Simply Bitcoin, is basically saying what Nico of Simply Bitcoin is saying 6 months ago. If the Fed doesn't answer to the duly elected president, who the hell does he answer to? And as Justice Thomas is pointing out, Woodrow Wilson believes that they shouldn't answer to anyone by popular vote because the people are too, quote unquote, stubborn and foolish and selfish. And, quote unquote, America, Wilson said, did too much by vote. So then who's in control? This is supposedly a republic. This is supposed to be a government by the people for the people. That's crazy. Anyways, it goes on to say, Wilson said that too much by vote and too little by expert administrative bodies. Who defines what an expert is? When we were going and we were living through the pandemic, this was like the most scary times. Remember, do you guys remember that? What the experts were saying? And then everybody else that went against the experts were called conspiracy theorists. And then 6 months later, the conspiracy theorists ended up, getting proved right. Do you guys just remember what Tulsi Gabbard released not too many weeks ago? I don't want to get into the details of it, right? Those are the experts that we were supposed to say. Those are the administrative experts, right? The whole point of the voting system is it's a check on power, right? It's the American people saying, listen, I've lost confidence in your ability to lead me. You don't have this godlike power of continuing to lead me. But here, that's the crux of the issue, is that as long as governments have the ability to create money for free that everyone else has to work for, that is a godlike power. There's a tremendous amount of power that comes from that, and it's bestowed onto the politicians. And then what the politicians do is that they go to you and they say, hey, if you vote for me, I'm going to give you free healthcare. If you vote for me, I'm going to give you free this. But it ain't free. You're paying for it via inflation. So Justice Thomas clearly knows his history here, and he's using President Woodrow Wilson's own words. And then you have to look at the historical context of what has happened since the establishment of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve was established in order to, stabilize the economy and control inflation. But since the establishment of the Federal Reserve, we've had two of the most catastrophic world wars in history. How do you think they were funded, ladies and gentlemen? And then we had the Great Depression in the 1930s. Again, wasn't the Federal Reserve established specifically to stop that type of thing? And then we had the Great Recession in 2008. All happened under the Federal Reserve. So if you judge a tree by its fruits, I would say that the Federal Reserve System did not accomplish what it was meant to accomplish. But the most insidious part of all of this was just reading Woodrow Wilson's own words. Was that even the goal in the first place? It just seems to me like the goal was power and control. And he's saying the quiet part out loud. I'm quoting him. This is not an opinion. So anyways, and again, this is a Supreme Court justice saying this. This isn't Nico Moran, Simply Bitcoin saying this. Is a Supreme Court justice that knows his history on the Federal Reserve. America said, I've already read that part. So when Wilson learned of the Albrecht plan, he asked for it to include a novel executive agency to govern the banking economy. It goes on to say, the independent regulatory commissions, thus was born the Federal Reserve Board. The board was the, quote, second independent regulatory commission in American history, following the Interstate Commerce Commission. Unlike the first and second national banks, which possess no sovereign power, the Federal Reserve Board would be a new federal agency with, quote, broad powers affecting the entire banking and currency system. And there's no accountability. Can't fight, even if you win the popular vote, win the Senate, win the House, the executive branch can't fire any members of the Federal Reserve. That is, excuse my language, batshit crazy. Then who are they accountable to? And is it really a representative democracy? If you can't fire the people that control and issue the money, then what type of system is this? I'll pass it on to Kent. What's your opinion? Those are crazy quotes, and that's a crazy dissenting opinion by Justice Thomas, just dropping historical facts and using President Wilson's own words. Like, it blows my mind when I read this. I'm like, I have to cover this on the show.
Yeah, I've never read those words either. But, you know, the Federal Reserve was hatched through a conspiracy that's well documented in the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you've never read that book, please pick it up. It's never been disputed, the facts of that book, but it was an import from Europe, right? There was a grand conspiracy. You got elected in like around Christmas or something when none of the other Congress people were there. And if you look at it, directly after that occurred was not directly, within a couple years though, World War I broke out, and it was the ability to print money that allowed for like the first industrial age war to occur, then led to, after that, like the way that France and settling, that the Germans were quite indebted, and then crazy massive inflation occurred there, and Hitler rose to power, and then World War II breaks out, and then more money printer leads to more devastation, right? So you look at the devastation, the loss of life, the loss of time, and then you realize that we have this unelected bureaucratic body, right, that is running the money for all of us. And I think the word that you were missing, Nico, is sovereign, right? Like, what else do you call that? Because they are outside the rule of law. They are sitting there and they can do as they wish. So who are their masters? If they have none, they are sovereign, right?
And I think this is the part that like Wilson like really just exposed it. He truly believed, which is very anti-American, I might add. He truly believed that the people were too quote unquote foolish, selfish to self-determination. And the most insidious part of this is that he knew that as long as you can establish this sovereign board, right, that controls the money, in a way you can control the people and by doing that. Right. But this is where it slips. Like, this is where the mask comes off. Right. This is why Bitcoin is so important. This is what we're fighting for. Right. When we say separate money from state, like that's not an easy statement. It's not a hyperbolic statement either. Like, they literally just admitted in the Supreme Court that the executive branch doesn't have the power to fire a Federal Reserve Board governor. Then who in the hell does? Who in the hell does? What if they F up? What if they do something you don't agree with? There's no democratic accountability. There's no election that could check that. So are they a king? That's what it looks like.
So there's two things, right, that I want to point out. So if you look at the words that Woodrow Wilson used, and by the way, I've never heard these words, but I had a pretty neutral stance on Woodrow Wilson coming into this, but I don't think I like him after this. I mean, he basically called the U.S. people sheep, right? Like, those words describe a sheep. And you look at that, and then you look at the outcome of the Fed, and I would actually argue that the Fed is actually doing exactly as it was designed to do, which is ultimately to suck and be a parasitic force on the U.S. economy to move money from the lower classes in the working force into the pockets of the upper classes. So let me give a specific example. The target for inflation from the Federal Reserve is 2%, right? Let's put some numbers to this. Let's say that you worked all year and you had $10,000 you put in the bank. Let's reverse it so you think about it, because normally like it works backwards for us. So 2% inflation would mean that I have $9,800 worth of purchasing power. Let's imagine inflation actually didn't exist, but there was just a straight tax that they took 2% out of your bank account on January 1st every single day. So now you go from $10,000 in your bank account to $9,800. People would notice that. They would say, oh, that's theft. What are you doing? I worked for that money, right? That's not taxes that I consented to and agreed to and am giving to the government. And that's what inflation has been doing for how many decades now? And so and where does that money go, right? It goes to those closest to the money printer. That's the truth, because they get to spend the money first. And so they don't observe that inflationary impact that the rest of us do. So it's been the most surreptitious, roundabout way of basically draining the economic force from all of us. And that economic force is what all of us are working for, right? So people put their time and their value into the creation of money. So I create value for you, Nico, and you're going to pay me, right? So that's basically like I've traded my life force to get that money. And now somebody on the other side is taking it out of my back pocket while I'm doing that. It's just inherently immoral. And so the fact that we as a people haven't like actually taken hold of that fact, it's back to the Henry Ford quote. What was it back in the day where he's like, hey, if people understood how the monetary system worked, there'd be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Like, I think we're getting close to that, because that K-shaped economy is just getting so stretched. At some point, that band breaks.
100%. And as much as the politicians want to gaslight you into telling you otherwise, the number one cause for wealth inequality in the United States is the Federal Reserve. Full stop. The number one cause for wealth inequality, it's not taxes, it's not the billionaires, it's not the companies, it's literally the Federal Reserve. Full stop. So, and Woodrow Wilson said it. It's like, listen, people are too foolish. There's too much things that are being done by vote. We can't have that, right? We need to set up a system that is sovereign, that is quote unquote independent from accountability, really, because we know better. That's essentially the argument that I'm seeing. So, what not better reason for buying Bitcoin, mining Bitcoin, earning Bitcoin, and putting into self-custody? Because that is how you protest. You say, listen, I don't want to participate. Like, you can keep it, it's fine, but like, I'm just going to opt out. I'm going to opt out into a better system, a fair system, a system that has rules without rulers, a system that is open and transparent. I'm going to opt out into that, because I just don't want to participate in your system. That's what Bitcoin's ultimately, this is what the revolution is, right? And I think a lot of people associate the word revolution with like, people with pitchforks and torches. Like, yes, like those are revolutions, but this is the peaceful revolution, because all it requires is for you to take your time, your work, and your energy to reclaim it by buying Bitcoin, earning Bitcoin, mining Bitcoin, putting that Bitcoin into self-custody, and you're a participant of the revolution, because you're opting out of that system, and that system needs you. This is why governments are so hell-bent on saying, hey, you need a CBDC, hey, you need a digital ID. They're creating those systems to continue the fiat system, because they know that if people had a choice, and they know that if people start getting educated and they had a choice between the two said systems, people are going to choose the better system. It's human nature. It all comes down to incentives. And when we were talking about stablecoins earlier, one of the things that I love about stablecoins is that they function as a Trojan horse. And the reason for that is because it gives people access to digital wallets, number one. So they get comfortable with it. And number two, eventually, even if you live in the global south, it's a massive upgrade to go from the Bolivar to the dollar. Massive upgrade. But after you start living on the dollar for, let's say a decade or half a decade or whatever, you're going to start scratching your head and saying, wait a second, I'm still losing my purchasing power. And this is where Bitcoin comes in. So I think what Bitcoiners overestimated is how fast this was going to happen. I think what we underestimate is how much of the incentives are on our side. And ultimately, this is why Bitcoin ultimately will win, right? Because it's really, is your money on incentives or is your money on coercion? No pun intended there, right? So my money's on incentives, and I think incentives are going to win ultimately at the end of the day, and they're going to throw everything they can at us, and they're going to use all the buzzwords, protect the children, AML, KYC, this is for your protection, regulatory clarity. Their excuses are going to start suffering from inflation because they're going to start running out, right? But anyways, guys, it's going to be a great show. We're going to be talking about where we are in the current bear market. I think we're 75% through it. My opinion, my humble opinion, we're 75% through this thing. And I think this time next year, we're going to be in a much better spot. So historically speaking, I'm going to caveat that. Historically speaking, this happens to be the most opportune time to start stacking sats or mining wild sats with SAS. So we're going to be right back just after the break, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned, smash that like button, and consider subscribing to Simply Bitcoin. I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin. Here's something most Bitcoin holders never figure out until it's too late. You're sitting on wealth you can't touch without selling. Ledin fixes that. Bitcoin-backed loans. You keep your stack, you get cash. And they just introduced their lowest rates ever. No complexity, no fine print. The larger the loan, the lower the rate. These new rates apply to all new loans, refinances, and renewals. You'll see all the rates up front before you apply. The new, lower rates come with Ledin's gold standard protection. Your Bitcoin remains custodied and is never lent out for interest. Perfect 8-year track record of keeping clients' assets safe. Auto top-ups, LTV alerts, and partial repayments to keep you in control. Repay whenever you want with zero penalties or monthly payments. Ledin's perfect $10 billion track record through every market cycle in the last 8 years speaks for itself. Don't choose between a great rate and the safety of your Bitcoin. Get both at Ledin. If you ever thought, what happens to my Bitcoin if something happens to me? Or what happens if I lose my phone? You're not alone. For a lot of people, the biggest barrier to self-custody isn't buying Bitcoin. It's the fear of making a mistake. And that's why I like BitKey, and I recommend it to my friends and family. BitKey is a Bitcoin wallet built for real life. Not just for day one, but for everything that happens in between. Lost devices, upgrades, accidents, and long-term ownership. There's no seed phrase to write down and worry about losing. And no single point of failure that can lock you out of your Bitcoin forever. What really stands out about BitKey is the peace of mind. Recovery is built in. Inheritance is built in. It's a complete self-custody system built by the team behind Square and Cash App, designed to make holding your own Bitcoin simpler and safer. Take self-custody of your Bitcoin today using BitKey. Go to bitkey.world and use promo code SIMPLY for 10% off your new BitKey. That's bitkey.world, promo code SIMPLY. All right, everybody, we are back. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the question of this segment is going to be a very simple one. Where are we in the Bitcoin bear market? And we're going to discuss that. Of course, this is kind of heading into speculation territory. Nobody knows where the price of Bitcoin is going to be tomorrow or the day after, but I think we kind of know the general direction, right? It's infinity divided by 21 million. As long as governments continue to print money, number go up. So first data point I'm going to show to you guys is Mild G Investments. He says the Bitcoin ETFs are capitulating. 90% of them are underwater. Bottom is very close. And here's a graphic that he points out. And then the next data point that I'll share to you guys, I know that a lot of you guys gave me a lot of heat for this, but I'm sticking to my guns because I've been saying this since October. The only theory or model that has not broken, and it could break, and once it breaks, I'll say, hey, you know what? We're in a different cycle, is the 4-year cycle theory. Has not broken, ladies and gentlemen. It has played out to a T. We were supposed to top in October. We topped in October. If we follow the 4-year cycle theory, we should be bottoming out relatively soon, over the next couple of months or so. And as Benjamin Cohen of Into the Cryptoverse is showing here on this post, this is comparing the different cycles. So the orange one is cycle 3. This is 2017. The green one is 2021. And then the purple one is the cycle of 2024, 2025, when the ETFs got involved and all of that stuff. So as you can see, it did underperform to a lot of people's expectations. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact the ETF was approved. So we had a high before the halving. That's never really happened before. I think a lot of the alpha came in 2023 and 2024 rather than the parabolic year. And it was a cycle that topped on apathy rather than euphoria, right? Which as Bitcoiners, we've never really experienced that before, right? So if you have expectations for a euphoric classical Bitcoin blow off top, Bitcoin has a way to take those expectations and just grind them down, right? So imagine, right? Like let's be blunt here. If you bought the top in 2021, 5 years later, you're down on your investment. That's not too good, right? So, but that again, from an from an ROI perspective, from an opportunity perspective, historically speaking, these are when legends are made, right? This is when all the tourists get flushed out, everyone loses, everyone gets disillusioned by Bitcoin, and that happens to be your opportunity. But this graph points it out perfectly, right? So as you could see, this it's to a T, right? It's so close where the 2021 capitulation happened and we found a bottom. And the 2018 capitulation happened, and then the 2022 capitulation happened. As you could see, it happened around the exact same time. And the peaks happened around the exact same time. So I'm not seeing anything that's telling me that this time is different, because that was the whole thing. Like, I had Opti come on the show, Walker come on the show, and they literally metaphorically beat me up with the 2x4 and said, Nico, this time is different. The institutions are here. And the 4-year cycle is dead. This is a super cycle. We're going up forever. And in October, I was like, no, this is like every other cycle. What we're going to see this cycle is we're going to see the capitulation of the treasury companies. We're going to see the capitulation of Wall Street. And that's exactly how it's played out. And the only difference, guys, like the only difference between the previous cycles and this cycle is the fact that because Michael Saylor is the CEO of a public company, everything that you see that he does is public. But the psychology is exactly the same. The only difference is in the previous cycles, the capitulation happened in retail. So you didn't see people capitulating, but the behavior was exactly the same. So the psychology hasn't fundamentally changed. And if we don't learn from the past, we're destined to repeat it. So the good news is that if the 4-year cycle holds, ladies and gentlemen, we got 2 or 3 months left of this. And then the party's back in action. We got 3 years of upside. This is fantastic, right? That's the good news. The bad news is that technically these last 3 months is where you see the crazy capitulation happen. If it happens, right? We don't know that yet. That's yet to be determined, because we have to caveat this with, it would be weird to have a traditional capitulation event because we didn't have the classical euphoric top. The classical euphoric top is what leads to those crazy bear markets, because that's when people are just buying at absurd prices. We didn't have that. We had this top that was apathetic. It was like this little tiny, we had a top, but, and people felt a little bit of euphoria, but it was just kind of like a tease, right? So if we didn't have a euphoric top, are we going to see a classic capitulation event? That's yet to be determined. I think that's what we're going to learn this year. Anyways, Kent, I want to get your thoughts on this. Where's your mind on all of this, man? Because it has been the classic bear market midterm year, right? The bear markets tend to happen on midterm years, historically speaking. How have you experienced it? What's your take on it? What's your take on the 4-year cycle?
Man, this has been going through my mind the last couple of months. So first of all, you've been right. I'm going to say that here. Just, not worthy. You were right. I was in the, hey, we're in I didn't call for a super cycle here, but I thought we were in an elongated cycle. Like, we were stretching out and we still had like a euphoria phase ahead. I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on is the 4-year cycle truly still intact? And the reason why I'm going to ask this question is because we had an all-time high before the halving, right? And there was a moment of euphoria then, like when the ETFs were all launching and Trump was coming into office, right? There was a run-up that I think went up to like 74K, and the previous all-time high was like 69K, and that had never happened. So does that serve as anything important? I don't know. The time will tell, but I am in the camp right now that, I'm back to 4-year maximalism, 4-year cycle maximalism, and that we are going to see the bottom as we classically do. I think that, cards are not off the table for me to see a capitulation event. That would be classic. And because we had this anomalous situation where we broke the all-time high before the halving, it leads me to believe, like, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. So I don't know is the bottom line. Certainly if we go beyond like October to December timeframe without like setting a bottom, I'll start to get concerned at that point that we're going into a longer bear market. But I think, the thing that I over-indexed on was the ETFs and the Michael Saylor strategy. I thought from my vantage point, that more institutional capital was going into those. And as the data has come out, no, that's not been the case. A lot of that capital that's been flowing in has been coming from retail, right? Like, to me, there was a great use case for, like, hey, we've got capital that cannot allocate directly to Bitcoin, right? We got to allocate through equity. I agreed with that thesis. The problem is that's not the capital that drove up the prices there. And so that means that capital did not flow into Bitcoin. And that's actually quite sad to me that so many people went that direction with their capital, thinking that it was better, safer, and it didn't go into Bitcoin. And where would we be? There's no counterfactual, right? But where would we be, Nico, if that capital had actually just come and bought spot Bitcoin and then moved it off exchanges? I don't know, but I certainly hope that that's a question that we answer and we get smarter as a community from.
Absolutely. And one of the things you pointed out, right, which is we saw the capital flow into a lot of the treasury companies. And then now we're seeing the shiny new toys, as I call them, right? So people are paying attention to the SpaceX IPO, and they're like, hey, like, this is the new thing. Like, AI is the new thing. And I personally, Kent, I absolutely love that. And the reason I love that is because this bear market actually reminds me more closely, and I this was before my time, but just based on talking with people, it reminds me of the 2013, 2014, 2015 bear market. And the reason it reminds me of that is this is the first bear market that I'm getting messages from, from Bitcoiners that I'm not going to name any names, and they're basically worried. They're like, is it done? Like, what's going on here? And I'm for the first time, I'm getting these messages of disillusionment. And in the 2018 and 2022 bear markets, we all knew this thing was going to rip. Like, it was like it was a consensus in the Bitcoin community, at least, right? We were like, yeah, it's just a bear market, but when this thing recovers, we're going to the moon, baby, right? This time it's like, wait, can it actually reach 300K or 400K? Is that even a possibility? Is that even possible? And that makes me so excited, because that is the exact condition that you need to have a euphoric top, because you can't have a euphoric top without people getting caught off on the sidelines. You can't have that. It's not possible. If the one thing that worried me in the beginning of 2025, I remember telling Opti this, like, that was the euphoric top when Trump got elected. It was the euphoric top. But it wasn't the price top, but it was the euphoric top. And I remember telling Opti, I'm like, dude, like, it kind of worries me that everyone and their mother knows for an absolute fact that we're going to the moon in December. And that's not how markets work. Markets don't work that way, right? But this time, guess what the common consensus, including with Bitcoiners, is telling me? I don't even know if it's possible that Bitcoin could reach these new highs. And then that reminds me of 2016 when I got in. If you told me when I got in that Bitcoin was going to rip from $500-$600 to $20,000 in a span of a year and a half, 2 years, no one would have believed you. Everyone would be like, bro, the top for Bitcoin, maybe 10K, 5K. That was a dream if that were to happen. But then what happened? Bitcoin reached these crazy highs that no one expected. It was completely unexpected. Even in January of 2017, when the price of Bitcoin was at $1,000 per coin. Can you imagine that? $1,000 per coin, bro. Holy cow. People had no idea. Like, people had people had no idea that this thing was going to be at 20,000 by the next year. And even if you bought in the beginning of January, in January of 2017, even if you bought at $1,000, even with the 80% crash, you would still be 3.5x up on your investment, because the bottom was $3,500. So those are the vibes I'm getting right now. Is I love the disillusionment. Bring more of it, because that is the condition that you need for Bitcoin to reach those new tops and for it to have a classical euphoric run. which I think everyone in their people don't because it happened so long ago. People just don't believe Bitcoin could do that anymore.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, man. And I think, it's not just this disillusionment. It's also like a feeling of like existential angst within the community a bit. Like, not is it possible, but like, hey, have we spent all our time and energy doing something that was for naught? And that's great. I agree with you. And I think it sets up the right conditions for something different to occur. But I think what we've been experiencing is these last two cycles. So I was here, you and I adopted Bitcoin about the same time. And, that bull run really captured the imagination for me of what's possible. And I think the last two cycles, we've been seeing big boy money show up, right? In commercial, industrial, sovereign capital is pouring into the space. And it feels to me like the last two cycles have sort of lulled the community into what's possible, right? Because so many people have joined since that 2017 run that they didn't see that possibility and don't understand the absolute scarcity of when there's no Bitcoin to buy, the price just keeps going up, right? It was a very radical experience to live through. But it feels like Bitcoin has been digesting Wall Street. Well, Wall Street has been thinking that they were digesting Bitcoin. And I think the jury's still out if that is really going on the way that I see it. But I think that we're getting through this cycle and we're going to come out the other side. And there's going to be greater understanding of Bitcoin at the TradFi level. And when Bitcoin starts to run again, all the TradFi guys are going to have seen everything that happened with the digital asset treasuries, the ETFs, and they're going to say, forget this. The people that stuck around that understood Bitcoin, and they're going to start accumulating and putting into self-custody the way that the Bitcoiners have said forever. The funniest part about being a Bitcoiner is you come into Bitcoin and you ignore all the advice because you think the old timer is always wrong. And then after enough times of being hit over the head with a 2x4 and making dumb decisions by the marketplace, right? Not by anybody else, you realize the old timers are right. Let me listen to them. And I feel like that was TradFi this last cycle. And so let's see. I could be totally wrong on this. I've been wrong lots of times, including how this cycle is played out. But it certainly seems to me like we are birthing the next cohort of Bitcoiners right now. And that pain is necessary to get through the fires to forge those Bitcoiners. And I'm here for it. I'm welcoming them into to be part of the clan. We need Team Orange to win. And I think I'm curious to see who the voices are that rise out of that in the next 12 to 18 months.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think one thing we can agree on is, yes, it's been a bear market year. It took a while for people to come to that realization, but I would say the good news out of all of this is we're basically through the thick of things, guys. Like we have been going down for a very long time. Eventually that stops. Eventually sellers get exhausted and eventually the price starts going up again, right? So that's the good news. And then again, it's the most opportune time, historically speaking, to be stacking sats, to be mining sats. Someone in the chat, I love when Nico starts ranting about bear markets. He starts to get Vietnam PTSD visions of previous bear markets. Absolutely, bro. Listen, the reason I knew the party was over in October was because I had this gut instinctual feeling. And I was like, and I've described it many times on the show, if like you go to a nightclub or you go to a bar and you're having a good time and they just turn on the lights, it's that same feeling. And I was like, oh God, like that was it. Okay. 4 years. We got to wait 4 more years now. Like, and it's like, damn, like that sucks. Right. But the good news is a lot of time has happened since October, right? Like we've paid our dues. We've been in the trenches. We've been hodling. Like this is what hodling is all about. Like if you're class of 2025, you are earning your stripes. If you're class of 2021, I would say you're earning your stripes still, right? And this is what Bitcoin's all about. And it spares no one, including Sailor. Like everyone has to earn their stripes. Time in the market beats timing the market. The most successful Bitcoiners that I know, the ones that have bags, are the people that have been around the longest. It's not the people that have traded or that have done this. It's just the people that have been around the longest and they've been able to hold on to their Bitcoin the longest. Those are the people that have won, in my experience. So guys, we're going to be right back. We're going to be talking about SaaS mining, Bitcoin mining as a service. And we have the CEO in the house joining us today, Kent. And we're going to be right back just after the break. Stay tuned. I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy across 3 continents, HIVE runs dual engines, Bitcoin mining and AI compute. Their AI platform is ranked #1 in the world for network performance, and it's doing something bigger than compute. It's accelerating human discovery, the science, the breakthroughs, pushing humanity further and faster. Listed on the NASDAQ with the ticker HIVE. Catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech on X or HIVEdigitaltech.com. You secured your Bitcoin, but did you secure your devices too? They're still broadcasting your location and digital footprint. GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell, 5G, EMF, all of it is leaking. Escape Zone fixes that. Their Faraday bags block every signal your device emits, so you decide when you're detectable, not the grid. Built for Bitcoiners who know sovereignty isn't just your wallet. It's your phone, your hardware wallet, your keys, and your entire digital life. Go to escapezone.com/simply and use code SIMPLY for 10% off. That's escapezone.com/simply, code SIMPLY. All right, everybody, we are back. Oh, wrong camera angle. There we go. And I want to talk about SaaS mining. Ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, there is different ways of accumulating Satoshis than just buying them. You could also mine them. Originally, back in the day, the only way you can get Satoshis, the only way you can get Bitcoin was by mining it, right? And one of the most awesome things about mining, and I learned this the hard way, right, is that actually it was a really good friend of mine. He's now like the CEO of one of the large, I think they pivoted to AI, but he was the CEO of like one of the large publicly traded Bitcoin miners. And the way that he described it to me is like, Nico, like, mining is kind of like a levered long. Like, that's the way that he described it. He's like, in the most simplistic sense, like he described it to me that way. And it took me a while to digest it. But if I add my lived experience versus what he told me, you want to talk about opportune times to start mining, right? It'd be the bear markets. It's the most painful times, but it's those times that when you look back on, you're going to be like, wow, I'm so happy I started when I started. Because here's the thing about mining. If you start when the bull market is up in full swing, like, yes, you know, more money, whatever. But in a way, you're missing all that alpha that you could have been accumulating, because remember, the hash rate is going down. So you're actually mining more Bitcoin than you could be. And one of the things, and we were actually talking about this on the previous show, Kent, and it just stood out to me, which is right now, if you're buying one of your machines at SaaS, what's the monthly payout?
About 350,000 sats last time I looked. And that's the most sats that you could get paid out per unit since July of last year.
What is the dollar amount of that?
Oh, 350,000 sats. Jeez.
I could do it real quick.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to do the math on that. I haven't crunched it. We're at 58K, like 58K gang in the house today.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it right here. 350,000.
So I do know the Bitcoin production cost, right? Or the Bitcoin energy cost is how I describe it. So that's just a simple, how many sats you get, how much is your electric bill, divide those two together, about 49,000.
So I'm getting 350,000 sats is $204 US.
Yep.
So, but here's the catch, ladies and gentlemen. This is the catch that I want you guys to pay attention to. That's $204 in today's prices. This is the catch, right? So when Bitcoin makes all-time highs, and let's say you've been mining for a year or 2 years, you look back and you weren't mining $204. You were mining $400, right? You were mining potentially $600, $700. That's where you're like, oh my God, this was so obvious, right? So it's these times, right, when legends are made, when legends are formed. And I learned this from experience because I've told you guys many times, I initially got into the industry through mining. That was my first entrepreneurial endeavor in the business. And I had to close up shop, back in 2018 because it was super painful. We went from 20K to 3,500. And I'm like, dude, I can't even pay the lights. If I would have stuck it out, I would have a pretty big mining business today, right? I would have made a lot of money, but I didn't, right? And, I pivoted to media. It worked out okay, right? But that's what I want you guys to take away from that. And what I love about SAS is it takes away the complexity out of mining, and you're also partnering up with a company that has aligned incentives with yours, right? So SAS doesn't make money unless your miners are online and they're actively hashing, right? So that means that they're always incentivized to make sure that those machines are actively hashing, because if they're not actively hashing, SAS doesn't make doesn't make money, right? So I love the aligned incentive model. And Ken, if you want to add to that, it'd be great.
Yeah, I think coming into Bitcoin mining, I came from a completely different career in energy, and coming into Bitcoin mining as a Bitcoiner, I kept looking at this thing and saying, my gosh, I think we're not seeing this right? And so let me give you a very simple truth that most Bitcoiners have forgotten, is that Satoshi designed the Bitcoin network to distribute Bitcoin through mining. He didn't design the Bitcoin network to distribute Bitcoin through buying, right? And there's been downstream consequences of the fact that we've all gone to buy. And this isn't to make anybody feel guilty. I mean, I'm as guilty of that as anybody. But I also think that nobody has come to market and solved to make it easy for people to acquire their Bitcoin through mining. And that's been the mission, right? I want to compete with exchanges for your business to acquire Bitcoin the way Satoshi designed the network. And the reason that it is better Bitcoin, in my opinion, is you're getting it at cost, right? That production cost. And you were able to get that outside of the surveillance state, right? You are able to get that directly from the protocol. And there's an advantage to that, and many of our customers enjoy that advantage. But the last reason is that you get to take advantage right now. So specifically, right now we are at a unique time at the bottom of the bear market, right? So Bob Burnett has come up with this amazing trifecta that holds out to be perfectly true. I've been operating data centers now for about 4 years, and what I have seen plays out exactly the same last 4 years is that you never get all three of the characteristics you need to mine together at the same time. And those are cheap energy, capital, and equipment. And right now is the time in the market where the capital is the weakest. And the reason why the capital is the weakest is because those numbers you just read off, they look the worst. I'll straight up be the first to tell you that. And the people that have historically won the most at mining deploy their capital exactly when the numbers look the worst. And the reason why they do that is because the manufacturers are suffering. And so they're dropping their pants and giving the best prices on their hardware. And so you're able to pick up the compute, the equipment at such a low cost right now that you wind up generating that combination plus the difficulty coming back, you're generating more sats. And this is the key thought that I want to leave everybody with is you want to think of mining as an accumulation strategy. So you are putting dollars in the same way that you go put your dollars on an exchange and do dollar cost averaging. You're not going to take those sats and sell them, are you? No, you're going to hold them for at least 4 years. That's the classic wisdom. So with mining, plan to do the same. Inject dollars in, sit on your sats. You're going to be very happy with the outcome. Now, if you don't believe Bitcoin's price is going to go up, please don't go into mining. But as long as you have the faith and confidence, and the crazy part is most people that we talk to like to ask the question, hey, what do you think Bitcoin's price is going to do 3 years out from now? That's the average lifespan of the equipment. Most people are telling us 150, 200, 300,000. Well, if that's what you think is going to happen with Bitcoin, guess what? Mining is a wonderful investment.
I 100% agree, and I learned that from experience, right? This is the most opportune times is when the bear markets are in full force. Now, I do want to walk everyone through, the process, right? Because they're hearing this and perhaps they're a little bit you know, like, oh, like, hey, Nico, like this sounds all great and stuff, but like I don't have the technical expertise to set up a miner and go through, you know, the learning curve and all this. It sounds fantastic, but like, you know, I don't even know where to start. And this is where SAS mining comes in, right? So SAS mining, I like to call it's like the Uber of Bitcoin mining, right? They have this amazing website. There's a dashboard. You literally buy the miner on the dashboard, and within 24 to 48 hours, that miner is up and running, and you're getting Satoshi straight to your SAS mining dashboard, which then you can withdraw to your personal wallet, right? So it makes the whole process incredibly easy. You could see your miner up in real time. You could see it hashing in real time, and you start getting deposits in real time. So it takes away the complexity and the capital. And to be honest with you, if you're trying to set up a mining operation, it isn't cheap. So it takes away all the complexities and the capital requirements that it would technically require if you were just to set all this up yourself. It takes all of that away. It dramatically decreases the learning curve, and it makes it as simple as basically ordering food on Uber, right? That's what SAS mining is so awesome, right? The dashboard is incredible. It's really great. You guys have free consultation. You guys could reach out to their support at any time. And these are wild sats that you guys are mining, meaning they go from the miner, they go straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You could read between the lines there, right? So, yeah, I mean, do you talk a little bit about the process? What was your philosophy in building it that way, Kent? Because, again, you guys essentially removed all the complexities, all the technicalities that go with setting up your own mining operation. You guys take care of that, and the users just... they get to mine Bitcoin, right? In the comfort of their own home, and just wait on the Uber app. Just wait for the delivery time, I guess, would be the analogy.
You got it. So here's, coming into this industry, I was like, okay, there's a couple things we need to optimize for, right? If we're going to compete for your business to acquire Bitcoin, what do I need to do? One, I need to have your trust. Two, I need to make it as easy and as convenient as it is to go buy. Right? So how do I do that? And the answer is I've got to build software. And so we were the first company to come along and build this software layer, you know, software as a service, but applied to mining. That's where we came up with mining as a service, right? We made it very intentional. And then we strapped a data center to it, and we've expanded. We've got 4 data centers now. So what is that actual experience? You come to our website. We've got a curated list of mining rigs and the data centers where we have capacity. We don't have capacity available in each of them. You purchase, you select it, put in your cart. You like the value proposition, this amount of sats. This is the dollar price. This is the electricity bill, and you purchase it just like you would. We've got Apple Pay, Google Pay, you know, credit card, Bitcoin Lightning. You pay Bitcoin Lightning, you get a 5% discount. That we're just passing on the savings, but we're not profiting selling you hardware. We're not profiting by selling the electricity to service your mining rig. So once you get your mining rig purchased, and we've got inventory in our Texas data center right now, so we'd have you deployed, you know, 24 hours or so if you purchase something relatively soon before that inventory goes. But once you get through the purchase, you've now got an account. You see your dashboard. You give your Bitcoin address where you want your Bitcoin distributed. You choose how you want to pay your monthly service fee, and boom, that's it. You just sit back and you watch how many sats are accumulating at the mining pool level, and then those are automatically sent out. Now, how we get paid is we take a management fee as a percentage of the Bitcoin that's mined, 15%, right? And so for all the work, it costs millions of dollars to get infrastructure set up, right? And we find data center operators that take care of that for us, that we can trust. We curate all that side of things. We get it all set up. It takes months to do, by the way, and get the rack space ready to go. At that point, do we offer it to the public, right? So we take and we actually democratize that access by chunking it down to just even a single mining rig. And we've got the interesting part that I see right now in the cycle is, as I was saying, this is when the smart money deploys their capital into mining. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing definite regular retail, smaller single double mining rig sort of purchases. Those have tailed off, but we're getting like large chunky purchases instead, as people are like, hey, I'm going to deploy capital. So I'm saying this just to let you guys know that there really is smart money capital that's buying right now, and we're seeing that demand in the market. Now, the last thing I'll say is, as a CEO building through a bear market, is we've done a lot of building of late. And as a result of that, and just being in bear market conditions, wanting to understand the market and how we're delivering value, if you actually go to SAS Mining and book a consultation, I'm actually taking all those consultations myself. So if you want to talk to me, learn about Bitcoin mining, ask questions, reach out through the website and book a consultation. A lot of people just go through the e-com purchase process like traditional, but a lot of people want to talk to somebody. Are you real? Can I really back what I'm saying here? And so, yeah, normally you'd be talking to one of our Bitcoin strategy advisors, but right now, for the next couple weeks, I'm taking meetings directly because I want to hear from the market. I want to hear what people are saying. Like, I want to understand the pain that's out there right now and how I can position us better for it.
I love that. Grab the bull by the horns, right? Take that responsibility upon yourself. That's what good CEOs do. Guys, start mining today. I'm telling you from experience, if I stayed mining in 2018, I'd be a much wealthier man right now.
And I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you did it because I wouldn't be sitting here today and you would have orange pilled so many people, Nico.
So again, bear markets, best time to start mining. Painful, but literally the best time to start mining. You'll look back on it and you'll be like, wow, that was literally a no-brainer. And you know what's quite interesting? You'll end up with more Bitcoin than if you would have just bought spot, which is the fascinating part, right? Because ultimately that's how mining economics work. Like, it wouldn't make sense if it cost you $58,355 to mine a Bitcoin. All the miners would go out of business. So the miners have to mine Bitcoin cheaper than the spot price, right? So if you're mining a Bitcoin, you're getting it cheaper than spot. It's just taking a little bit longer. But then again, this is where the long-term thinking comes into play. So again, great opportunity right now to start getting into mining. And again, you want to remove all the complexities, use SAS Mining, Bitcoin mining as a service. Go to sasmining.com today, book a free consultation. You could talk to Kent, or just go through their dashboard and just buy a miner in one of their many sites. Anyways, guys, that was today's show. Before we wrap up, I do want to give a very special shout out to our mining conference sponsor. Kent will be there. So, you don't want to miss Mining Disrupt 2020 Miami, Florida, July 21st through the 23rd. Definitely don't want to miss it. Scan the QR code on your screen. The whole Simply Bitcoin crew will be there. Kent will be there. It's going to be a celebration. It's going to be fantastic. The Ocean team's going to be there as well. You're not going to want to miss it. Go to Mining Disrupt and use the promo code Simply Bitcoin. Again, Simply Bitcoin to get 20% off your ticket. All right, everybody, that was today's show. Love you all. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.